The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed above Brianna Mitchell's head as she sat in the hard plastic chair, her hands gripping the papers so tightly they wrinkled at the edges. The words on the page blurred together, but she had read them enough times to know them by heart. 3 children. 3 separate treatment plans. A total of $47,000 not covered by her insurance. Across the waiting room, a mother bounced a baby on her knee while an elderly man coughed into his sleeve. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint odor of burned coffee from the vending machine. Brianna's stomach turned, but not from the smell. $47,000. She made $32,000 a year managing the front desk of the Riverside Inn, and that was before taxes. Before rent. Before the grocery bill that seemed to grow higher every month because her 5-year-olds had discovered they loved fresh fruit and milk by the gallon. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A text from her mother. Kids are fed. Ava drew you a picture. Isaiah lost another tooth. Ethan wants to know if you'll be home for bedtime story. We love you. Brianna pressed her thumb against the screen, staring at the message until it went blurry. She would not cry. Not here. Not in this waiting room full of strangers who had their own problems, their own bills, their own impossible choices. The pediatric specialist had been kind when he delivered the news. Isaiah's recurring ear infections required a specialist procedure. Ava needed glasses and occupational therapy for her fine motor skills. Ethan, her quiet one, had a heart murmur that needed monitoring with expensive tests every 3 months. None of it was optional. All of it was necessary. And none of it was something Brianna could afford. She folded the papers carefully and slid them into her worn brown purse, the one her mother had given her for her 25th birthday 3 years ago. The leather was cracking at the corners now, just like everything else in her life seemed to be cracking under the weight of responsibility she had never asked for but would never regret. The triplets were her heart walking around in 3 small bodies. Isaiah with his endless questions about how things worked. Ava with her drawings of rainbows and butterflies that covered every inch of their refrigerator. Ethan with his serious eyes that seemed to understand more than any 5-year-old should. She had done everything right. She had worked double shifts when she was pregnant, saving every penny she could. She had applied for every assistance program, every grant, every resource the county offered. She had begged her landlord for lower rent and her boss for more hours. She had sold her car and took the bus to save money. She had given up coffee shops and new clothes and anything that was not absolutely essential. And still it was not enough. The walk home from the bus stop took 20 minutes, passing through the neighborhood where the streetlights worked about half the time and the corner store sold expired milk at full price. Brianna walked with her keys between her fingers, not because she expected trouble but because a woman walking alone at dusk learned to be prepared. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had once been painted yellow but now showed more gray than anything else. The hallway smelled like someone was cooking fish, and the elevator had been broken for 2 months. Brianna climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Before you continue reading this story, ask yourself something. If you were in Brianna's shoes, carrying the weight of 3 children alone, would you have the strength to keep climbing those stairs every single night? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below telling us what you would do in her situation. Your engagement helps us bring more stories of hope and love to families just like yours. When she opened the door, the sound of laughter hit her first. Her mother Dorothy sat on the couch, a child on each side, while Isaiah stood in front of them acting out some story with wild gestures and sound effects. "Mommy!" Ava screamed, launching herself off the couch and running toward Brianna with her arms wide open. Brianna caught her daughter and lifted her, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and Play-Doh. Within seconds, Isaiah and Ethan had joined the pile, wrapping their small arms around her legs. "Hey my babies," Brianna said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I missed you so much today." Dorothy Mitchell stood from the couch, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in her signature bun. At 55, she looked 10 years younger except for the worry lines around her eyes that had deepened since Brianna's father passed away 8 years ago. "How did it go?" Dorothy asked, her eyes searching her daughter's face for answers. Brianna shook her head slightly, just enough for her mother to understand. "Not in front of the children." "Who wants ice cream?" Dorothy asked suddenly, clapping her hands together. "I think I saw some chocolate in the freezer." The triplets exploded with excitement, racing toward the kitchen on legs that seemed too small to move so fast. Dorothy gave Brianna a long look before following them. Brianna sank onto the couch, allowing herself 1 minute to fall apart. Just 60 seconds to feel the full weight of her situation before she had to be strong again. She counted the seconds in her head, watching the second hand on the cheap clock above the television move in its steady circle. At 60, she stood up, smoothed her green blouse and walked into the kitchen to serve ice cream to her children. Later that night, after 3 bedtime stories and 2 glasses of water and 1 final bathroom trip, Brianna sat at the kitchen table with her mother. The papers from the hospital lay between them like a bomb waiting to explode. $47,000, Dorothy whispered, shaking her head. That's more than most people make in a year. I know, Mama. Maybe we could do a payment plan. They already offered one. $800 a month for 5 years. That's our entire grocery budget. Dorothy reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Her skin was rough from years of working as a cleaning lady in hotels across the city, the same hotels where Brianna had learned the hospitality business from the ground up. We'll figure it out, Dorothy said. We always do. How? Brianna asked, and for the first time that day she let the desperation creep into her voice. I've tried everything. I work 50 hours a week already. The kids need me home. I can't take a second job and leave them with you every night. It's not fair to any of us. Her phone buzzed on the table and she glanced at it out of habit. Her eyes widened. What is it? Dorothy asked. Brianna picked up the phone and read the email twice before answering. It's from a company called Whitmore Enterprises. They want to interview me for a regional director position. A regional director? Of what? Hospitality operations. They're expanding their hotel division and they found my profile on that job website I signed up for months ago. Brianna scrolled through the email, her heart beating faster. The salary is? Mama, the salary is $120,000 a year. Dorothy's hand flew to her chest. That's almost 4 times what you make now. Full benefits. Healthcare that actually covers specialist visits. A 401k with matching. And they're willing to interview me next week. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sirens from somewhere across the city. This could be the answer, Dorothy said finally. This could fix everything. Brianna nodded slowly, but something in the back of her mind whispered caution. Things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She had learned that lesson 5 years ago in a Las Vegas hotel room, waking up alone with nothing but a note and a number that would never connect. But her children needed those treatments. They needed a mother who could provide for them without working herself to death. They needed hope. And right now this email was the only hope she had. I'll call them tomorrow, Brianna said. I'll schedule the interview. Dorothy squeezed her hand. That's my girl. You've been fighting alone for too long. Maybe this is the universe finally giving you a break. Brianna smiled, but the expression did not quite reach her eyes. The universe had not been particularly kind to her in the past. She had stopped believing in luck the morning she woke up in that Vegas hotel room to find the other side of the bed empty and cold. But she would go to that interview. She would wear her best outfit, the maroon blazer she had bought for her cousin's wedding 5 years ago, the same trip that had changed her life forever. She would smile and answer questions and pretend she was confident even when her insides were shaking. Because that was what mothers did. They fought. They clawed. They kept going even when every step felt impossible. For Isaiah. For Ava. For Ethan. For the 3 hearts that made her own heart keep beating. Brianna turned off the kitchen light and walked to the room where her children slept in a row of small beds pushed against the wall. She stood in the doorway and watched them breathe, their chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. I'm going to fix this, she whispered into the darkness. I promise. She did not know how. She did not know if this interview would lead anywhere or if it was just another dead end on a road full of them. But she would try. She would always try. 5 years earlier, Brianna Mitchell stepped off the plane in Las Vegas with butterflies in her stomach and a bridesmaid dress in her carry-on. Her cousin Tamika was getting married at the Bellagio, and for the first time in 3 years, Brianna had taken an entire weekend off work. The desert heat hit her like a wall when she walked outside to find the shuttle. Even at 7 in the evening, the temperature was over 90 degrees, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost artificial in their brightness. Vegas, baby, Tamika had said when she called to give Brianna the news. I want the whole thing. Fountains. Chandeliers. Elvis impersonators if we can find good ones. Brianna had laughed and promised to be there. She could not have known then that this weekend would change the entire trajectory of her life. The hotel was everything Tamika had promised and more. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high Brianna had to crane her neck to see them. The carpet was so plush her shoes seemed to sink with every step. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with the faint tang of cigarette smoke from the casino floor. Her room was on the 14th floor, a modest single with a view of the parking structure, but Brianna did not care. She was not here for the room. She was here to watch her favorite cousin marry the love of her life and to maybe, just maybe, have one night where she was not thinking about bills and work schedules and the future. The rehearsal dinner was at an Italian restaurant with white tablecloths and candles that dripped wax onto silver holders. Brianna wore her favorite green dress, the one that made her brown skin glow and her curves look elegant rather than excessive. Her natural curls were pinned up on one side with a simple gold clip. After the dinner, while the wedding party was taking photos in the lobby, Brianna excused herself to the bar. She was happy for Tamika, genuinely happy, but something about watching her cousin glow with love made Brianna acutely aware of her own loneliness. At 23 she had never been in love. She had dated a few times in college but nothing serious. Her focus had always been on school, then work, then helping her mother after her father died. Romance was something that happened to other people, people who had time and energy and lives that were not already stretched thin. The bar was quieter than she expected, most of the Friday night crowd already lost to the slot machines and poker tables. Brianna settled onto a leather stool and ordered a glass of white wine, something cheap enough that she would not feel guilty but nice enough to feel like a treat. That was when she noticed him. He sat 3 stools down, his dark hair slightly disheveled and his tie loosened around his collar. Even from a distance, she could see he was handsome in a conventional way, with strong features and broad shoulders beneath his expensive-looking gray suit. But what caught her attention was his expression. He looked lost. Not lost like he did not know where he was. Lost like he did not know who he was supposed to be. Their eyes met. He smiled, and Brianna felt something shift in her chest, a small door opening that she had not even realized was closed. "Rough night?" she asked, surprising herself. She was not usually the one to start conversations with strangers. "You could say that," he replied. His voice was warm, with a hint of something she could not quite identify. "Business meeting that did not go as planned. I came here to celebrate a deal, and instead I'm drowning my sorrows in overpriced bourbon. I'm sorry to hear that." He studied her for a moment, his blue eyes taking in her green dress and gold clip with apparent appreciation. "What about you? Let me guess. Wedding?" Brianna laughed. "That obvious?" The dress, the hotel, the slightly overwhelmed look of a bridesmaid who just realized she has to wake up at 6 tomorrow for hair and makeup. He grinned. "I've been to enough of my cousin's weddings to recognize the signs. My cousin Tamika. She's marrying her college sweetheart tomorrow." "That's beautiful." He said it like he meant it, like he truly believed in love despite whatever business disappointment had brought him to this bar. He moved to the stool next to hers, leaving a respectful distance but close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something clean and subtle, not the heavy scents that usually gave her headaches. "I'm Jonathan," he said, extending his hand. "Brianna." His handshake was firm but gentle. His palm was warm against hers. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Connecticut, about his complicated relationship with his father, about his dream of running a company that actually helped people instead of just making money. She told him about losing her dad, about working her way up from hotel housekeeping to front desk management, about her secret wish to one day own a small bed and breakfast in the mountains. He listened like her words mattered. Like she mattered. Sometime after midnight, the bar started to fill with the post-show crowd, and the noise level made conversation difficult. Jonathan leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Would you want to get out of here? I know a quiet spot on the roof with an incredible view of the Strip." She should have said no. She was a careful person, a practical person, a person who did not go to quiet rooftops with men she had just met in Las Vegas bars. But there was something about him. Something that made her feel safe and seen and alive in a way she had not felt in years. "Yes," she said. The rooftop was everything he promised. The lights of the Las Vegas Strip stretched out below them like a river of stars fallen to earth. The air was cooler up here, a gentle breeze carrying the sounds of the city. Laughter and music and the distant chime of slot machines. Jonathan had brought up a blanket from his room, and they sat on it together, shoulders touching, watching the fountains of the Bellagio dance to music they could not quite hear. "This is the most spontaneous thing I've ever done," Brianna admitted. "Really? Really? I'm usually the responsible one. The one who makes lists and follows plans and never stays up past 10. Jonathan turned to look at her, his expression soft in the ambient light from the city below. "Then I'm honored to be part of your rebellion." "Some rebellion. Sitting on a roof with a stranger." "I don't feel like a stranger," he said quietly. "I feel like I've been waiting to meet you my whole life." It should have sounded like a line. The kind of thing men said in movies and romance novels, empty words designed to lower defenses. But the way he said it, with such genuine wonder in his voice, made Brianna believe him. She kissed him first. She would remember that forever, the way she leaned in and pressed her lips to his and felt the whole world shift on its axis. He kissed her back with equal parts tenderness and passion, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. What happened next felt inevitable. Natural. Like the continuation of a story they had started writing the moment their eyes met across that bar. They went to his room. They did not sleep until the sky began to lighten on the horizon, pink and gold creeping through the gaps in the curtains. When Brianna finally drifted off, her head on his chest and his arm wrapped around her, she felt something she had never felt before. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone trying to survive, but the quiet hope of someone who had just discovered that the world was bigger and more beautiful than she had imagined. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of silence. The bed beside her was empty. Brianna sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest and looked around the room. His shoes were gone. His jacket was gone. The only evidence that he had ever been there was a folded piece of paper on the pillow where his head had rested. With shaking hands she opened it. Brianna, I'm so sorry. Family emergency. I had to leave immediately. Last night was the most incredible night of my life. Please call me. We need to see each other again. Jonathan. Below the words was a phone number. Brianna grabbed her own phone from the nightstand and dialed the number with trembling fingers. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. She tried again. Same result. 15 times she dialed that number over the next week. 15 times she heard that same cold, automated message. He was gone. Vanished. As if that magical night had been nothing but a dream. 6 weeks later, Brianna sat on the edge of her bathtub and stared at the 3 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the sink. Not a dream. Very, very real. And she was carrying his child. Children, as she would find out at her first ultrasound. 3 of them. Triplets, the doctor said with an expression that was equal parts excitement and concern. High-risk pregnancy. Bed rest. Complications. Brianna had walked out of that appointment in a daze. She had exactly $212 in her savings account and no partner, no family wealth, no safety net of any kind. But as she stood on the sidewalk outside the clinic, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach, she made a decision. She would keep them. She would raise them. She would give them a life full of love even if she could not give them a life full of luxury. Because they were hers. Hers and his, whoever he really was. 3 little lives depending on her to be strong enough for all of them. And Brianna Mitchell was nothing if not strong. The pregnancy was hard. Harder than anything Brianna had ever done, and she had done plenty of hard things. By month 5 she could no longer work. The doctor had ordered bed rest after her blood pressure spiked during a routine checkup. She spent her days on her mother's couch, watching daytime television and trying not to panic about the future. Dorothy had moved Brianna into her 2-bedroom apartment without hesitation. There was no room to argue, no space for pride. Brianna needed help and Dorothy was there to give it. Stop worrying, Dorothy would say every time she caught Brianna staring at the ceiling with that distant look in her eyes. Worry doesn't pay bills and it doesn't grow babies. Rest does both. Tanya Brooks came by every weekend with food and gossip and an endless supply of baby items she had collected from garage sales and thrift stores. She was Brianna's best friend since elementary school, a round-faced woman with a laugh that could fill any room. Girl, I found you 3 cribs for $50 total, Tanya announced one Saturday, hauling in pieces of furniture that looked like they had seen better days but were sturdy enough to hold sleeping babies. The lady was moving and just wanted them gone. We sand them down, paint them up, they'll be good as new. I don't know what I would do without you, Brianna said, her eyes filling with tears. The hormones made her cry at everything. Commercials. Sunsets. The kindness of friends. You would figure it out, Tanya said firmly. Because that's what you do. But you don't have to figure it out alone. That's what I'm for. The babies arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. Brianna labored for 16 hours before the doctor finally declared that a cesarean section was necessary. The triplets were too tangled up in there, he said with a gentle smile. They need a little help finding the exit. Isaiah came first. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, with a head full of dark curly hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward. Ava followed 2 minutes later, smaller and quieter, with eyes that seemed to take in everything. Ethan was last, the smallest of the 3, silent at first in a way that made Brianna's heart stop until his tiny cry filled the operating room. 3 babies. 3 perfect, terrifying, beautiful babies. Dorothy cried when she first saw them, lined up in their hospital bassinets like a display of everything precious in the world. Tanya brought balloons in 3 colors, pink and blue and green. What are you going to tell them? Tanya asked quietly on the second day, when Brianna was learning to nurse 3 babies in rotation and feeling like a failure because nothing came naturally. About their father? Brianna looked at her children. Isaiah was sleeping with his fist curled against his cheek. Ava was staring at the ceiling with that wise old soul expression that would become her trademark. Ethan was hiccuping softly after his last feeding. The truth, she said finally. That he was kind and gentle and made me feel special. That something happened that night that took him away before I could tell him about them. That I loved him for one night, and that night was enough to create 3 miracles. That's a lot of faith to put in a man who disappeared. Maybe. But I don't want them growing up thinking they weren't wanted. I don't want them carrying that weight. Brianna shifted Ava gently in her arms. Whatever happened, it wasn't about them. It was never about them. The first year was a blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes and moments of joy so intense they brought tears. Brianna and Dorothy developed a system. Dorothy took the night shifts while Brianna recovered from her surgery, then they switched when Brianna was healed enough to function on broken sleep. When the triplets were 4 months old, Brianna went back to work. She found a job at a hotel closer to her mother's apartment, one that offered flexible hours and did not mind when she had to leave early because one of the babies was running a fever. The money was never enough. It was never close to enough. But they managed. Birthdays came and went. First steps multiplied by 3. First words, first tantrums, first hugs that made everything worth it. By the time the triplets were 3, they had developed distinct personalities that amazed Brianna daily. Isaiah was the explorer, always climbing furniture and asking why about everything. Ava was the artist, covering every available surface with crayon drawings of families, always 4 figures, 3 small and 1 tall with curly hair like mommy. Ethan was the observer, watching his siblings with quiet intensity before choosing his actions carefully. He's going to be a philosopher, Dorothy said one evening, watching Ethan study an anthill in the backyard with complete concentration. Mark my words. That boy thinks before he speaks. Unlike his brother, Brianna laughed as Isaiah crashed through the bushes chasing a butterfly. At 4 they started preschool. The free program at the community center was not fancy, but the teachers were patient and the building was safe. Brianna dropped them off every morning in their matching backpacks, purple for Ava, blue for Isaiah, green for Ethan, and felt a mix of pride and terror as she watched them walk through those doors. They were growing up. They were becoming people. And she was doing it all alone. There were hard nights. Nights when all 3 had stomach bugs and Brianna spent hours cleaning up messes while Dorothy held crying children. Nights when the electricity got shut off because Brianna had to choose between the power bill and antibiotics for Ava's ear infection. Nights when Brianna locked herself in the bathroom and sobbed silently so her children would not hear. But there were good nights too. Nights when all 3 fell asleep in her bed, their small bodies curved against hers like puzzle pieces finding their place. Nights when Dorothy made her famous macaroni and cheese and they ate together at the tiny kitchen table, laughing about something Isaiah had said at school. Nights when Tanya brought over ice cream and they watched old movies while the triplets slept. Those were the nights that kept her going. On the triplets' 5th birthday, Brianna baked a cake in the shape of a rainbow because Ava was obsessed with rainbows that year. She found second-hand bikes in decent condition and spent 3 nights cleaning them up and adding new handlebar streamers. She invited the kids from the building, the ones who played with her triplets in the courtyard, and they had a small party in the community room downstairs. Isaiah blew out 5 candles with one mighty breath. Ava wished for a puppy, she announced to everyone. Ethan closed his eyes and kept his wish to himself. That night, after the cake was eaten and the bikes were tried and the children were finally asleep, Brianna sat on the fire escape outside her kitchen window and looked up at the stars. 5 years. 5 years of doing the impossible every single day. She had not thought about Jonathan in months. The memories had faded to a soft ache rather than a sharp pain. She no longer dialed that disconnected number or scrolled through social media looking for his face. He was a ghost, a beautiful ghost from a single night that had given her everything that mattered. But sometimes, usually late at night when she was too tired to keep the thoughts at bay, she wondered. Where was he? Did he ever think about that night? Did he know, somehow, that somewhere in the world 3 children had his eyes? She would never know. And she had made peace with that. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy, who was sleeping in the living room to give Brianna the bedroom for once. Stop sitting in the cold and come to bed. The babies will be up in 6 hours whether you sleep or not. Brianna smiled, climbed back inside, and closed the window against the night air. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New impossible things to somehow make possible. But tonight, she had a warm bed and sleeping children and a mother who loved her. That was enough. It had to be enough. For now. The email from Whitmore Enterprises arrived on a Monday morning, 2 weeks after the hospital visit that had turned Brianna's world upside down. She read it 3 times before she believed it was real. Dear Ms. Mitchell, we are pleased to invite you to interview for the position of Regional Director of Hospitality Operations at Whitmore Enterprises. Your extensive experience in hotel management and your outstanding references have made you a strong candidate for this role. Please contact our Human Resources Department at your earliest convenience to schedule an interview. Brianna sat at the kitchen table, her cold coffee forgotten beside her, and stared at the screen of her phone. This was it. This was the answer she had been praying for. She called the number immediately. The HR coordinator, a woman with a pleasant voice named Jennifer, scheduled her for Thursday afternoon. We're very excited to meet you, Ms. Mitchell. The hiring committee was impressed by your portfolio. Thank you, Brianna managed. I'm excited too. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Brianna updated her resume and printed fresh copies on the good paper she had saved for exactly this purpose. She practiced interview questions with Dorothy, who pretended to be a stern executive asking about management philosophies. She took her maroon blazer to the dry cleaner and borrowed a pair of low heels from Tanya. You're going to crush this, Tanya said on Wednesday night, helping Brianna pick out a blouse that would work under the blazer. You know hotels better than anyone. You've been running that front desk for years while the actual managers took credit for your work. That's different from being a regional director. Is it? You've been directing things regionally for your entire career. You've just been doing it from the ground level instead of the corner office. Tanya held up a soft blue blouse. This one. It brings out your eyes. Thursday arrived faster than Brianna was prepared for. She woke at 5, showered, did her hair in a professional updo that still let her curls frame her face, and applied minimal makeup. She kissed each of her sleeping children on the forehead. Mommy has an important meeting today, she whispered. Wish me luck. Dorothy was already up, making breakfast in the tiny kitchen. She turned when Brianna came out and her eyes immediately filled with tears. Look at you, she said softly. My baby girl. Looking like she runs the whole world. Mama, don't make me cry. I just did my makeup. Dorothy crossed the kitchen and took Brianna's face in her hands. You are going to walk into that building and show them exactly who Brianna Mitchell is. Not a struggling single mother. Not a woman who works too hard for too little. A leader. A fighter. Someone who deserves every good thing that's coming her way. Brianna hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, the same one she had worn for as long as Brianna could remember. I love you, Mama. I love you too. Now go get that job. The Whitmore Enterprises building was downtown, a glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. Brianna had walked past it 100 times without ever really seeing it. Now she stood at its entrance, her heart pounding against her ribs, and took a deep breath. The lobby was massive, all marble floors and modern art and people in expensive suits walking with purpose. Brianna felt suddenly small in her blazer from 5 years ago and her borrowed shoes. But she straightened her spine and walked to the reception desk like she belonged there. Brianna Mitchell, she said. I have an interview with Human Resources at 2 o'clock. The receptionist smiled warmly. Of course, Ms. Mitchell. Please take a seat. Someone will be down to collect you shortly. Brianna sat on a leather couch that was probably worth more than her monthly salary and tried not to fidget. Around her, people moved with the confident ease of those who belonged in places like this. She wondered if she would ever feel that comfortable in her own skin. Ms. Mitchell? She looked up to find a woman in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and kind eyes behind rectangular glasses. I'm Helen Carter, Executive Assistant to the CEO. I'll be escorting you to your interview. Brianna shook her hand, surprised by the warmth she found there. Thank you. I appreciate it. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in comfortable silence. Helen made small talk about the weather and the building and how glad she was that spring was finally arriving. Brianna felt some of her tension ease. The interview room was bright and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 people sat at a long table, the HR director, a thin man named Walter, a woman from the hospitality division named Patricia, and a younger man named Daniel who introduced himself as the director of operations. For the next hour they asked questions. About her management philosophy. about difficult guests she had handled, about her approach to team leadership and crisis management and customer satisfaction. Brianna answered each one with examples from her years at the Riverside Inn, stories of late-night emergencies and impossible demands and creative solutions that had earned the hotel its 5-star rating. She talked about the elderly couple whose car broke down on Christmas Eve and how she had arranged for a local mechanic to come in on holiday pay. About the wedding party whose caterer canceled and how she had personally cooked for 60 guests using the hotel kitchen. About the fire alarm that went off during a convention and how she had evacuated 400 people without a single injury. The interviewers nodded. They wrote notes. They asked follow-up questions that showed they were genuinely interested. When it was over, Patricia leaned forward with a smile. Ms. Mitchell, I have to be honest. I've interviewed 12 candidates for this position, and you are by far the most impressive. Brianna felt heat rise to her cheeks. Thank you. I'm very passionate about hospitality. It shows. Patricia exchanged looks with her colleagues. We typically like to take a few days to deliberate, but I think I speak for everyone when I say we'd like to offer you the position. The words did not register at first. Brianna sat very still, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Walter smiled. We're offering you the job, Ms. Mitchell. Regional Director of Hospitality Operations. The salary is $120,000 annually, with full benefits including health, dental and vision for you and your dependents. You would start in 2 weeks. Dependents, full benefits, $120,000. Brianna felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Thank you. I accept. Absolutely. Thank you so much. The rest of the meeting was a blur of paperwork and handshakes and promises to email orientation materials. Helen Carter appeared to escort her back to the lobby, and in the elevator the older woman put a hand on Brianna's arm. Congratulations, Helen said gently. We're lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. Helen's smile was knowing. You'll fit right in. The CEO values hard work and integrity above all else. You'll meet him at the executive meeting next week. He likes to welcome all new directors personally. Brianna nodded, barely hearing the words. Her mind was already racing ahead. She had to call her mother. She had to tell Tanya. She had to calculate how quickly she could pay off the medical bills, how soon she could move the kids into a real apartment with separate bedrooms, how this changed everything. The CEO. She would meet him next week. That barely registered either. She had no idea that meeting would change her life all over again. The morning of the executive meeting, Brianna woke before her alarm. She had been with Whitmore Enterprises for 1 week, spending her days in training sessions and orientation meetings and learning the complex structure of a company that operated hotels across 12 states. Today was different. Today she would sit in the big boardroom on the 30th floor and be introduced to the entire executive team, including the CEO. She dressed with extra care. A bright blue dress that fell just below her knees, professional but not boring. Her natural curls were styled softly around her face. Her makeup was minimal but polished. You look beautiful, Mommy, Ava said at breakfast, her small face smeared with strawberry jam. Thank you, baby. Big day today. Are you going to meet the boss of all the bosses? Isaiah asked through a mouthful of cereal. I am. Is he mean? Brianna paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. I don't know yet. I hope not. Ethan looked up from his coloring book with his serious eyes. You should be brave, Mommy. Like when Isaiah has bad dreams and you make them go away. Something warm spread through Brianna's chest. That's very good advice, Ethan. I'll be brave. Dorothy walked her to the door, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blazer. Call me after, she said. Let me know how it goes. I will. The boardroom was on the top floor of the building, accessed by a private elevator that required a special keycard. Brianna had received hers on her first day, but this was the first time she used it. The doors opened onto a floor that was somehow even more impressive than the rest of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The carpet was so thick her heels left temporary impressions. Helen Carter met her at the elevator with a warm smile. Ready for your big debut? As ready as I'll ever be. You'll do fine. Just be yourself. The boardroom was already filling when they entered. Brianna recognized some faces from her orientation, the heads of various departments who had stopped by to introduce themselves. She smiled and nodded and found her seat at the long conference table, a leather chair that probably cost more than her last 3 pieces of furniture combined. A man in his 40s took the seat beside her. He had a friendly face and graying temples, and he extended his hand with an easy smile. Gregory Caldwell, he said. Chief Operations Officer. You must be our new hospitality director. Patricia has been raving about you. Brianna Mitchell. It's nice to meet you. The pleasure is mine. Fair warning, these meetings can run long. I usually bring snacks. He patted his jacket pocket with a conspiratorial grin. Brianna laughed, feeling some of her nervousness ease. I'll keep that in mind for next time. The room gradually filled. 12 executives in total, plus a few assistants taking notes along the walls. Helen Carter sat near the door with a tablet, ready to assist. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door at the far end of the room opened. Brianna had her head down, reviewing the agenda one final time. She heard the murmur of greetings, the rustle of people straightening in their seats. She looked up, and the world stopped. He walked with confidence, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his tie a deep burgundy. His hair was shorter now, touched with the slightest hint of gray at the temples. But his face was the same. Those blue eyes. That jawline. The way he moved. Jonathan. The man from Vegas. The man who had disappeared without a trace. The man whose face she had searched for on every street, in every crowd, for months after that night. The father of her children. He was taking his place at the head of the table, saying something to Helen Carter when their eyes met. Brianna watched the moment of recognition cross his features. The slight widening of his eyes. The parting of his lips. The way his entire body went still. For what felt like an eternity, they stared at each other across the conference table. The room continued to move around them, executives shuffling papers and adjusting chairs, but Brianna and Jonathan were frozen in their own private world. Then he recovered. She watched him pull himself together like a man putting on armor. His expression became professional, neutral, controlled. But his eyes stayed fixed on hers. "Good morning, everyone," he said, and his voice was the same. Warm and deep and so painfully familiar. "Thank you for being here. Before we begin with the quarterly review, I understand we have a new member joining the executive team." He looked at her, and Brianna felt the weight of every moment between that night and this one pressing down on her chest. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice perfectly even. "Welcome to Whitmore Enterprises. We're glad to have you." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that. The meeting continued. Numbers were discussed. Projections were analyzed. Brianna forced herself to pay attention, to take notes, to nod at appropriate moments. But her mind was screaming. He was here. All this time, all these years of wondering, and he had been right here in this city. Running this company. Living this life. Did he know? Had he ever tried to find her? Or had she been nothing but a forgettable night to him? After 2 hours, the meeting finally ended. Executives gathered their materials and headed for the door, chattering about lunch plans and afternoon schedules. Brianna stood on shaky legs, gathering her folders. "Ms. Mitchell." His voice close behind her. She turned. He stood 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same scent from that night. Something clean and subtle that made her heart ache. "May I speak with you in my office?" It was not really a question. She could see that in his eyes, in the tension of his shoulders. He needed answers as badly as she did. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore." They walked through the corridors in silence, executives parting around them like water around stones. Helen Carter gave Brianna a questioning look, but Brianna just shook her head slightly. Not now. His office was at the end of the hall, a corner space with windows on 2 sides and a view that stretched for miles. He closed the door behind them and stood very still, his back against the wood. "Brianna." He said her name like a prayer. Like something holy and lost and finally found. "Jonathan. I tried to find you." The words came out rushed, desperate. "That morning I got a call that my father had a heart attack. I grabbed my phone to call for a car and dropped it in the sink. I wrote that note so fast I must have written a wrong number. I didn't even realize until I landed in Connecticut and tried to call you from a payphone." "A payphone?" "My phone was destroyed. I didn't have your last name. I only knew you were in Vegas for a wedding and your first name was Brianna. Do you know how many Briannas I searched for? How many wedding registries I went through?" His voice cracked, and Brianna saw something in his eyes she had never expected to see there. Pain. Real bone-deep pain. "My father was in the hospital for 2 months. By the time I got back to Vegas to try to find you, the hotel had no record of a Brianna staying there that weekend. They said they couldn't give out guest information anyway, privacy policies." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from that night on the rooftop. "I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped wondering what happened to the woman who changed my life in a single night. Brianna's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. All these years she had told herself stories. That he had used her and discarded her. That she meant nothing. That she had been naive and foolish. But he had looked for her. He had tried. "I have to tell you something," she said quietly. "Anything." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers she scrolled to her photos and selected one. 3 faces smiled up from the screen. Isaiah mid-laugh, Ava holding up a drawing, Ethan with his serious eyes and hint of a smile. Their names are Isaiah, Ava, and Ethan. They turned 5 2 months ago. They're triplets. She watched his face as understanding dawned. The way his expression shifted from confusion to shock to something she could only describe as wonder. "They're yours, Jonathan. They're ours." The silence stretched between them, heavy and full. Then Jonathan Whitmore, billionaire CEO, sank into the nearest chair and began to cry. The tears did not last long. Jonathan was not a man accustomed to showing vulnerability, and Brianna could see him pulling himself together even as the last traces of moisture disappeared from his cheeks. "Triplets," he said, his voice hoarse. "I have triplets." "Yes. And you raised them alone. For 5 years. With my mother's help. And my best friend Tanya." Brianna sat in the chair across from his, suddenly exhausted. "It wasn't easy. But they're worth it. They're worth everything." Jonathan stared at the photo on her phone like a man seeing the sunrise for the first time. His finger hovered over the screen, tracing the outlines of their small faces without touching. "Tell me about them," he said. "Everything. I need to know everything." So Brianna talked. She told him about Isaiah's first steps, how he walked straight to the television and tried to climb inside. About Ava's first drawing, a scribble of purple that she insisted was a dragon. About Ethan's first word, which was book, and how he still loved books more than anything else. She told him about the hard times too. The emergency room visits and the financial struggles and the nights she sat on the fire escape wondering if she was enough for 3 children who needed so much more than she could give. Jonathan listened without interrupting. His face went through 100 emotions, joy and sorrow and guilt and love all tangled together. When she finally stopped talking he was quiet for a long moment. "I want to be part of their lives," he said. "Not just financially, although I want to help with that too. I want to know them. I want to be there for birthdays and first days of school and bad dreams. I want to be their father." "They don't know anything about you," Brianna said carefully. "I told them their father was a good man who had to leave before he knew about them. I wanted them to grow up knowing they were wanted, even if the circumstances were complicated." "Thank you for that." His voice was thick. "Thank you for not telling them I abandoned them." "You didn't? I understand that now." He stood and walked to the window looking out at the city below. "I've made a lot of decisions in my life that I'm proud of. Building this company. Creating jobs. Helping communities. But none of that means anything compared to the fact that I have 3 children I've never met." Brianna joined him at the window. They stood side by side, not touching, looking at the world spread out below them. "There's something else," she said. "The reason I took this job. The medical bills." She told him about the hospital visit. About Isaiah's ears and Ava's glasses and Ethan's heart. About the $47,000 she could not afford. Before she finished speaking, Jonathan was shaking his head. "That's done. I'll take care of all of it. Whatever they need, whatever specialists, whatever treatments. I'm their father. That's my responsibility." "Jonathan, I didn't tell you this to ask for money." "I know." He turned to face her, and his expression was so earnest it made her chest ache. "But you're not alone anymore, Brianna. You've been carrying this weight by yourself for 5 years. Let me help. Please." Everything in her wanted to refuse. She had built her life on independence, on proving she could handle anything without anyone's help. Accepting this felt like admitting failure. But then she thought of Isaiah and his recurring earaches. Ava squinting at her drawings. Ethan's doctor saying they needed to monitor his heart more closely. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you. Thank you for saying yes." He hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and steady, and she remembered how his hands had felt that night 5 years ago. "When can I meet them?" "This weekend? Saturday? I usually take them to the park near our apartment. I'll be there." They stood in comfortable silence, hands still linked, looking out at the city that suddenly seemed full of possibility instead of obstacles. There was so much still to figure out. So many questions about what this would mean for their lives, their careers, the complicated dance of co-parenting children who did not know their father existed. But for the first time in 5 years, Brianna did not feel alone. And that made all the difference. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that felt like a gift. The sky was bright blue, the air was warm, and the park near Brianna's apartment was filled with the sounds of children playing. Brianna sat on their usual bench, her mother beside her, watching Isaiah push Ava on the swings while Ethan drew in the dirt with a stick. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and she kept checking her phone for the time. "He'll be here," Dorothy said, reading her daughter's anxiety. "A man who cried when he saw pictures of his children isn't going to miss this." "I know. I'm just nervous." "Of course you are. This is a big moment." Dorothy squeezed her hand. "But those babies deserve to know their father. And he deserves to know them." At exactly 11 o'clock, Brianna spotted him. Jonathan was walking across the grass toward them, and even from a distance she could see the nerves in his steps. He was carrying 3 gift bags, one in each hand and one tucked under his arm, and he was wearing casual clothes for the first time she had seen, jeans and a blue button-down that made his eyes look even brighter. "Kids," Brianna called. "Come here for a minute." The triplets came running, their faces curious. They clustered around her legs, Isaiah bouncing with energy, Ava clutching her sweatshirt sleeve, Ethan watching everything with his thoughtful gaze. "There's someone I want you to meet," Brianna said, kneeling to their level. "He's a very special person. Someone I've wanted to tell you about for a long time." Jonathan had reached them. He stood a few feet away, his expression a mix of terror and wonder, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff deciding whether to jump. "This is Jonathan," Brianna said simply. "He's your daddy." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Isaiah spoke. "Our daddy?" "Yes, baby." "The one who had to go away?" "Yes." Isaiah studied Jonathan with the intense scrutiny only a 5-year-old could manage. Then he walked right up to him and asked, "Why'd you leave?" Jonathan crouched down so they were at eye level. "I had to help my daddy who was very sick. And I lost your mommy's phone number before I could call her. I tried really hard to find her again, but I couldn't. When I finally found her, I found out about all 3 of you, and it was the happiest day of my life. Are you going to stay now?" This from Ava, her voice small. "Yes," Jonathan said, and Brianna could hear the promise in his voice. "I'm going to stay. If that's okay with you." Ava tilted her head, considering. "Okay. But you should know I like purple. And butterflies. And dogs, but mommy says we can't have one yet." A smile broke across Jonathan's face. "Those are all very good things to like." Ethan had not spoken, but he moved closer, studying Jonathan's face with those serious eyes. "You look like us," he said finally. "I do." Ethan nodded. "Your eyes are like Isaiah's. And your hair curls like Ava's when it's wet." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears again, but this time he blinked them back. "I'm glad I look like you. I'm so glad." The awkwardness melted away faster than Brianna had expected. Jonathan handed out the gift bags, each one carefully chosen. A science kit for Isaiah, who immediately started planning experiments. A set of colored pencils and a sketchbook for Ava, who clutched them to her chest like treasure. A stack of picture books for Ethan, including one about the solar system that made his eyes go wide. They spent the afternoon together. Jonathan pushed all 3 kids on the swings. He chased Isaiah around the playground until they were both breathless. He sat with Ava and admired her drawings. He listened to Ethan explain everything he knew about outer space, which was a surprising amount for a 5-year-old. Dorothy watched from the bench, and when Brianna joined her, she was wiping her eyes with a tissue. "He's good with them," Dorothy said. "Natural." "I know. It's strange. I spent so many years imagining this moment, and it's nothing like I expected." "Good strange or bad strange?" Brianna watched Jonathan help Ethan sound out words in his new book, their heads bent together over the pages. "Good strange. Definitely good." As the afternoon wound down, Jonathan walked over to where Brianna stood. His shirt was grass-stained and his hair was disheveled from where Isaiah had messed it up during their chase, and he looked happier than she had ever seen him. "I know it's too soon to talk about logistics," he said quietly, mindful of the children nearby. "But I want to help. More than just the medical bills. I want to set up trust funds for each of them. I want to help you find a bigger place, somewhere with room for them to run and play. And I want to be here. Not just today but every day I can manage." Brianna started to protest, the old reflexes kicking in. But then she looked at her children. Isaiah showing Ethan his new science kit. Ava drawing a picture of the whole family, 5 figures now instead of 4. "Okay," she said. "Yes. To all of it." Jonathan's smile was like sunrise. "Really? Really? These kids deserve everything. And I'm done being too proud to accept help from their father." He took her hand, a simple gesture that felt monumental. "Thank you, Brianna. Thank you for saying yes." They walked back to the apartment together, all 6 of them. Dorothy carried Ava, who had fallen asleep, against her shoulder. Isaiah held Ethan's hand, both of them clutching their new treasures. Jonathan walked beside Brianna, their shoulders occasionally brushing. It was not a fairy tale. There were still hard conversations ahead, still logistics to figure out and lives to rearrange. But for the first time in 5 years, Brianna felt like she could breathe. She was not alone anymore. And neither were her children. The weeks that followed were a slow transformation. Jonathan became a regular presence in their lives, arriving every evening he could manage for dinner and homework and bedtime stories. He was careful at first, mindful of boundaries, always asking Brianna before making any decisions about the children. Slowly, naturally, he became part of their routine. "Mr. Jonathan, can you read the spaceship book tonight?" Ethan would ask from his bed. "It's just Jonathan now, buddy." "And yes, of course." Dorothy warmed to him gradually, her initial suspicion melting as she watched him with her grandchildren. He helped her in the kitchen without being asked, washing dishes and chopping vegetables while she directed like a general. He asked about her life, her late husband, her journey as a mother and grandmother. He listened like her stories mattered. "He's a good man," Dorothy told Brianna one night after Jonathan had left. "Better than I expected from a billionaire." "I don't think of him as a billionaire." "Good. The money doesn't matter. What matters is how he looks at those babies. Like they're the most precious things in the world." Tanya met him at a Sunday barbecue Jonathan organized at a park with proper grills and picnic tables. She interrogated him for an hour about his intentions, his plans, his understanding of what Brianna had been through. He answered every question with patience and honesty. "I can't undo the last 5 years," he told Tanya. "I can only do better going forward. And I will. I promise you that." Tanya nodded, finally satisfied. "You heard her, you answered to me." "Understood." The apartment search was Jonathan's idea, and Brianna accepted his help with only minimal resistance. They found a place 3 weeks later, a 4-bedroom townhouse in a safe neighborhood with a backyard and a school district that ranked in the top 10 in the state. "This is too much," Brianna said when she first saw it. "It's exactly right," Jonathan replied. 3 kids need space to grow. Your mother deserves a room that's actually hers. And you deserve to stop worrying about whether the elevator works." She signed the lease that day. Jonathan paid the deposit and first year's rent, refusing to hear any arguments. Moving day was chaos in the best way. Gregory Caldwell showed up with a moving truck and 4 of Jonathan's employees who volunteered to help. Tanya organized the kitchen while Dorothy directed furniture placement like an air traffic controller. The triplets ran from empty room to empty room, claiming spaces and planning adventures. That night, after everyone had left and the children were finally asleep in their new beds, Brianna sat on the back porch and looked up at the stars. The yard was small but perfect, with enough room for the swing set Jonathan had already ordered. He joined her after a moment, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "You look happy," he said, handing her a glass. "I am happy." She took a sip, savoring the taste. "Scared too. This is all happening so fast. We can slow down if you need to." "No." She shook her head. "The kids love you. My mother loves you. Tanya has grudgingly accepted you. I don't want to slow down. I just want to make sure I'm not dreaming." Jonathan set down his glass and turned to face her. In the dim light from the porch lamp, his eyes were impossibly blue. "I've been thinking about that night in Vegas a lot lately," he said. "How I thought it was just one perfect night. How I never imagined it could lead to anything real. And now I know that one night was just the beginning. The start of something I didn't even know I wanted." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm not expecting anything, Brianna. Whatever pace you want, whatever boundaries you need, I'll respect them. But I want you to know that I'm not just here for the children." Her heart was pounding. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the woman I met in that bar, the one who talked about wanting a bed and breakfast in the mountains, the one who kissed me first on that rooftop, I never stopped thinking about her. And these past weeks, getting to know you again, seeing the incredible mother you've become, the amazing woman you've grown into, I'm falling for you all over again. Maybe I never stopped. We want to pause here and ask you something important. Do you believe in second chances? Do you think love can survive 5 years of distance and heartache and find its way back? If you do, please subscribe to this channel and share your own story of love and hope in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to believe in second chances. Brianna set down her wine glass and looked at this man who had turned her world upside down twice now. He was waiting, patient, not pushing, just offering his heart and letting her decide what to do with it. "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that I'm starting to feel it too. Whatever this is between us. I'm not ready to name it yet. But it's there." His smile was soft and full of hope. "That's enough for now. That's more than enough." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting. They sat together on that porch for another hour, talking about nothing and everything, two people learning each other all over again. The children slept soundly in their new rooms. Dorothy snored gently down the hall. And somewhere in the distance, a bird sang a night song that sounded like promise. The trouble started on a Monday morning. Brianna arrived at work to find Jonathan's office full of lawyers and his face as gray as stone. "What happened?" she asked Helen Carter, who was pacing the hallway outside. "Victor Brennan happened." Helen's voice was tight with worry. "He's a competitor who's been trying to undermine Whitmore Enterprises for years. He just filed for a hostile takeover." Brianna's stomach dropped. "Is that possible? Can he do that?" "He's been buying up shares quietly for months. Combined with some other investors he's convinced to back him, he has almost 40% of the company. If he gets another 11%, he can force Jonathan out." The next few weeks were some of the hardest Brianna had ever witnessed. Jonathan worked 18-hour days, fighting in boardrooms and courtrooms and conference calls that stretched past midnight. He came to see the children when he could, but the visits were shorter and his smile was strained. Brianna watched him running himself ragged and made a decision. She threw herself into the fight. Her hotel experience gave her insights into the hospitality division that the board found invaluable. She prepared presentations showing the long-term value of their hotel properties, demonstrating why selling them off for short-term gain, which was Brennan's plan, would be financial disaster. She stayed late and came early and worked side by side with Jonathan's team. Gregory Caldwell noticed her efforts. "You're good at this," he told her one evening. "Really good. I'm fighting for something I believe in." "For the company?" Brianna looked toward Jonathan's office, where he was still on the phone. "For him. For our family. This company is his dream. I'm not going to let someone take it away." The triplets did not understand why their daddy was so tired and their mommy was so busy, but they contributed in their own way. Ava drew pictures of smiling people with the word "win" written in her careful letters. Isaiah made cards that said, "You are the best daddy," with varying degrees of spelling accuracy. Ethan found his book about stars and marked the pages about perseverance, leaving it on Jonathan's desk without a word. Dorothy kept the household running, feeding everyone and making sure the children got to school on time and that Brianna remembered to eat. "This is what families do," Dorothy told Brianna one night when she apologized for the chaos. "We fight together. We hold each other up. You're not doing this alone, baby girl. You never were." The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Brianna was reviewing acquisition documents when she noticed something strange. A pattern in Victor Brennan's stock purchases that did not quite add up. She took her findings to Gregory, who took them to the legal team. 3 days later they had their answer. Victor Brennan had been insider trading. He had used confidential information from a mole inside Whitmore Enterprises to time his share purchases perfectly. It was illegal. It was traceable. And it was enough to stop him. The mole turned out to be a low-level executive in the finance department who had been promised a vice presidency in Brennan's new regime. When confronted with evidence, he cracked within minutes and agreed to testify. The board meeting where everything came out was tense and dramatic. Brennan's lawyers tried to spin the situation, but the evidence was undeniable. By the end of the day, Brennan had withdrawn his takeover bid, the SEC was launching an investigation, and Jonathan Whitmore's position as CEO was secure. Jonathan found Brianna in her office afterward. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, looking more exhausted and relieved than she had ever seen him. "You saved my company," he said. "I noticed an inconsistency. Anyone could have found it. But you were the one looking. You were the one who cared enough to dig." He crossed the room and took her hands. "Brianna, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. We're a team, remember? That's what you said. Whatever comes, we face it together." He pulled her into a hug and she let herself sink into his arms. He smelled like coffee and stress and something underneath that was just him. She breathed him in and felt her own tension finally start to release. "I have something planned for this weekend," he said into her hair. "Something for the family. A celebration." "What kind of celebration?" "You'll see." Saturday morning arrived with sunshine and the smell of pancakes drifting through the new townhouse. Dorothy was at the stove, the triplets were at the table arguing about who got the most chocolate chips, and Brianna was trying to figure out what Jonathan had planned. He had been mysterious all week, smiling secretively whenever she asked and giving vague answers about family time and surprises. When he arrived at 10, he was wearing a blue shirt that matched his eyes and carrying a picnic basket. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked the children. Isaiah jumped from his chair. "Where are we going?" "To a very special place." They piled into Jonathan's SUV, Dorothy in the front seat and Brianna in the back with the triplets. They drove out of the city, through suburbs and then into the countryside, where rolling hills replaced apartment buildings and the sky seemed wider than Brianna remembered. An hour later they pulled up to a property that made Brianna's breath catch. It was a bed and breakfast. A beautiful Victorian building with a wraparound porch and gardens full of flowers. A sign out front read Mount View Inn in elegant script. "Jonathan," Brianna whispered. "What is this?" He turned in his seat to face her, his expression nervous and hopeful. "You told me once, on a rooftop in Vegas, that your dream was to own a bed and breakfast in the mountains. Somewhere peaceful. Somewhere you could build a life." "I remember. This place went on the market last month. It's been family-owned for 50 years and they want to sell to someone who will love it as much as they did." He took a deep breath. "I want to buy it for you. For us. As a family home. A place where the kids can run and grow and have their own rooms with views of the mountains." Brianna could not speak. The tears were already falling and she did not try to stop them. "Can we see inside?" Ethan asked, his face pressed against the window. "Let's go look," Jonathan said. They explored every inch of that house. The kitchen with its original tile and updated appliances. The living room with the fireplace big enough for all of them to gather around. The bedrooms upstairs, each one with its own character. The attic that could become a playroom. The basement where Isaiah immediately started planning a laboratory. Dorothy stood on the back porch looking out at the mountain view, and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. The children ran through the gardens, discovering a vegetable patch and a small pond with goldfish and a tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. And Brianna stood in what would be the master bedroom, looking out at everything, trying to understand how her life had changed so completely. Jonathan found her there. "Is it too much?" he asked. "I know I keep doing grand gestures. If it's overwhelming, we don't have to." "It's perfect," she interrupted. "It's absolutely perfect." He crossed the room and stood beside her at the window. "I wanted to ask you something. Something important." Brianna turned to face him, her heart suddenly pounding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, a diamond ring caught the light from the window and scattered rainbows across the walls. "Brianna Mitchell," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "5 years ago, I met a woman who changed my life in a single night. I lost her because of circumstances neither of us could control. But now I've found her again and she's given me the 3 greatest gifts I could ever imagine. I don't want to lose her again. I don't want to spend another day not being by her side." He took her hand in his. "I'm not asking you to marry me because I'm rich or because I want to take care of you. You've proven you don't need anyone to take care of you. I'm asking because I love you. I love who you were that night in Vegas and who you've become in the years since. I love the mother you are and the partner you've been. I love our family, every messy, beautiful part of it." He got down on one knee and Brianna felt the tears streaming down her face. "Will you marry me?" She did not hesitate. Not for a second. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like coming home. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with 5 years of loneliness and hope and love all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, they heard cheering from below. They looked out the window to see the triplets and Dorothy in the garden, all 4 of them looking up and applauding. "They knew," Brianna laughed through her tears. "I asked their permission last week. Isaiah made me promise to buy him a real chemistry set. Ava wants to be the flower girl. Ethan just asked if I would keep reading him bedtime stories forever." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him yes. Every night for the rest of his life." 6 months later, on a perfect autumn afternoon, Brianna Mitchell married Jonathan Whitmore in the garden of their new home. The leaves were turning gold and red, and the mountains rose behind them like witnesses to their vows. Ava walked down the aisle in a purple dress, scattering flower petals with careful precision. Isaiah carried the rings on a pillow, walking so slowly and seriously that everyone smiled. Ethan stood beside his father as the youngest best man in history, holding Jonathan's hand during the ceremony. Dorothy sat in the front row and cried happy tears. Tanya served as maid of honor and only threatened Jonathan with bodily harm twice, both times affectionately. Gregory Caldwell gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the three children rushed forward to join the kiss, turning it into a family embrace that was slightly chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were finally asleep, Brianna and Jonathan stood on the porch of their bed and breakfast and looked up at the stars. 5 years ago, Brianna said, I woke up alone in a Vegas hotel room and thought my life was over. And now? She leaned into him, feeling his arm wrap around her shoulders. Now I know it was just beginning. He kissed the top of her head. This is just the start, you know. We have so much life left to live. So many adventures to have with those 3 wild children. I'm ready for all of it. So am I. They stood there together as the night grew deeper and the stars grew brighter, a family formed from chance and lost years and second chances. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams children dream when they are safe and loved and home. And outside, under the mountain sky, 2 people who had found each other twice held on tight and promised silently never to let go again. Forever was just beginning.